All right, YouTube, continuing on with the show. Kind of backing up to this a little bit, but yeah, this is the nice, wonderful manual that Madman and I have been working on for quite some time. With designer's notes, table of contents, information about the map, etc., etc., etc. A lot of words here, a lot of information. A lot of original stuff that we've written. This is version 1.4. It is the very first edition of the rulebook that we have had printed. Very cool to have this in our hands, to be able to hold something we've been working on for so long. And then in the back there, yeah, I've even got unit profiles, national objectives, game setup, more unit profiles, some expanded rules, more game setup, etc. Frequently asked. We even have a frequently asked questions in the back. quite cool. And then he threw a photo on the inside of the back and the inside of the front as well. So Madman did great work. But yeah, this is the. You can see a free PDF of this, and this is version 1.4. Going on from there, I want to backtrack just a little bit. At the end of my last video, I was talking about the Roundels to determine turn order to make space or make use of the Sahara here. And I kind of cut myself off because I realized I didn't have a Soviet Roundel. But anyway, so when you start the game, it's going to look like this. And then at round 3, provided China is not attacked, the National Protection War starts. And if the Russian Civil War starts, well, then you get rid of that and you add these. This one is a new edition, as well as this one, as I had previously mentioned. Oh, I think this is upside down, actually. Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be the new Roundel. It's not in the 1.4 rule book just yet, but this is a new edition that we're going to be using this to designate the difference between the Empire of Russia and the whites. You don't have to use this roundel. You do not have to use this roundel, but if you want to, you can. You can totally just stick with the out-of-box or standard Imperial Russian roundel. But just for flavor, you know, you can get this roundel if you want. And then over here, once the National Protection War has concluded within China, then China, regardless of which side, condenses and switches to this roundel, which is what is printed on the map. So do not fear if you have this roundel. Do not fear; it is still relevant. We just also have a more historically accurate roundel now thrown into the mix. All right, and I'll talk more about China's roundels when we get to them. But anyway, just kind of want to throw that out there. So that is also why this is not printed on the map. And also, if we wanted to change the turn order, or if anybody wanted to change the turn order of their own games, they can do that with ease, and they're not stuck with what is printed on the map for turn order. So anyway, moving on from there, I am going to get these out of the way. And I'm going to kind of briefly go over each Powers boxes as quickly as I can. And I'm going to do it in turn order. So this is my Austria-Hungary box, and as I have said, if you're doing out-of-box 1914 and you're expanding upon that, this is what you'll need. I'm just showing what you're going to need to add if you want to, or at least show what I do, right? So we got infantry. You got your standard infantry, and again, I have two sets of 1914 pieces. So I recommend at least 2 sets of 1914 pieces. Pretty much, mostly, yeah. 2 sets of let me rephrase that. 2 sets of 1914 pieces. Even when they reissue it with a few extra pieces, I would still recommend 2 sets, and then you can get a few extra pieces for powers that really need it. Like Germany needs a lot of infantry, Britain needs a lot of infantry, and I'll get to them when we cross that bridge. Infantry, artillery, out of box. If you want to play with trucks, you're going to have to probably spray paint your own trucks. These are trucks I got from what is it? Shapeways. I got these trucks from an account on Shapeways. Now, Shapeways is pretty expensive in comparison to, say, Historical Board Gaming or just other sites in general. So I understand not wanting to buy these, but I do like these molds a lot. And usually a few trucks, if you want to play with trucks, a few trucks is enough, because nobody at our game so far, at least, nobody starts out with any trucks. So they got trucks, and then I'll also probably do another video again in terms of what colors I used to paint, because I wanted to try and match the out-of-box pieces as best as I can. See if I can move over here and get a little more light directly on this, so you can see. Okay. Yeah, that's a little better lighting. Maybe more of a shadow. Let's see. Is that lighting making it worse or better? Probably make it more difficult to read. So pop back up a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so just for me, these are my boxes. Of course, you don't have to do this. It's just what I do in terms of like my label maker labels and prices. These Cavalry are from Risk, and various Cavalry are available through Risk. And if you get a copy of Risk, they're each power probably, or color rather, they're not really powers, but each color comes with 12 pieces. Now, 12 Cavalry. Now, obviously this doesn't match, but to me it just matches well enough. And I'm speaking to somebody who just doesn't really like to paint. I live in an apartment, so getting these painting every single piece is a little cumbersome. But when you have everything on the map, yes, this is brighter. But when you have everything on the map and stuff, like it's still, you can still tell this is a Austrian Cavalry. You'll be able to tell in comparison to the colors of everybody else around them. And this paint is not quite exact either. It's a little brighter, but I'd say it's probably matches a little better. Moving on from there, I'm just going to come back over here. Moving on from there, we got our transports, submarines, cruisers, dreadnoughts, battleships in the original game, but we call them dreadnoughts, and we increased the price to 15. All out of box. Fighters, out of box. And what I did with all of my fighters was I drilled, this was very early into my magnetizing career, or hobby rather, and very early on I decided to drill into these and magnetize them. And if I could go back and do this again, I would not do that. I would just take the magnet and glue it slightly off center from the wheel to the right, because getting it just right is a little difficult. And as you can see, it is kind of easy to damage these propellers because of the way they are shaped. So you have to put them on top of something to try and not like kind of off center to drill in, you know, so you don't crunch the propeller. But obviously on a few of them, it didn't work out quite so well in my favor like that. But for the most part, it works. It's fine, you know. But again, I would avoid drilling into these and just put a magnet as close as you can center, but you know, have to put it off center a little bit. But that's what I would do, and that's a 1 millimeter by 2 millimeter magnet, I think, or yeah, 2 millimeter by 1 millimeter magnet. I think those are the ones that come with the I Will Never Grow Up flight stands. Now, if you want to do bombers, the only way to do bombers is to do the HBG 3D printed bombers. So these are the Austria-Hungarian ones, and for each power, I did 5 bombers. And we haven't actually played a game with bombers in play yet. Madman still needs to figure out some 3D printed molds for bombers that he can make, and once he has those, we'll actually get a game of those going, with those going. In terms of the tanks, you can absolutely use the out-of-box tanks in 1914, but because the tanks in this war were so unique per each nation and a lot of crazy prototypes were had, I really wanted to take the time and paint as many tanks as I could, or not paint, but you know, I don't like to paint, but I did, because I was that determined to have the tanks that I should have, and not have Mark IVs or 5s for each power and such. But anyway, so this I think is called a Motorgeschütz or something like that. It's the one Austrian prototype tank. Kind of has a little bit of some skis. It's a very small 3D printed tank, so I'm not a huge fan of the size of it overall, but the point gets across. If I could probably do this again, I might just do German A7Vs for everybody. On the Central Power side, and then Mark IVs on the opposing side, etc. Maybe, or the Allied powers. Now, in terms of these, I have a task force marker system, and so I acquired these and gradually from historical board gaming, and so these are just task force markers. So if I don't have my other box here, but basically this just if it goes on the board, and or here goes on the board, and the number of units there are represented on a task force off to the side, right? So that's your Austrian task force, that's your Bulgarian task force, that's your Hungarian task force, and then this one here I use to keep track of the empire point for Germany and Austria-Hungary, but you could also use this as a task force marker, basically. This is just like a spare that I have, pretty much. I just threw it in here. And then, of course, your Roundels, which, again, you could use the out-of-box cardboard Roundels, but highly recommend just biting the bullet and upgrading all of your Roundels to historical board gamings or Combat Miniatures. Rich from Combat Miniatures is now making Roundels as well. They're from the same company or source as I understand it, so they are, and from what I have seen, they are very good quality, and they're just as good as the historical board gaming ones, if not identical. Maybe I can't say that, but my impression is that they're my impression from what I can tell is that they're identical in quality and material. So anyway, that's just the generic Austria-Hungary one. Okay, moving on from there. Put that off to the side. The Russian Empire. Infantry, artillery, basic ships, fighters, all out of box. Cavalry are from HBG, and these are actually Italian brown cavalry. They are not Russian brown, they are Italian brown, and it matches better with this than the Russian brown or cavalry they have. Again, trucks that I painted as well. They're crazy bombers that I painted and magnetized. I just glued the magnets on them. I didn't drill into these. Way too frail to drill into these. Russia had to paint their crazy Tsar tank, and when they finally had these in stock, it was just a joy on my end to be able to get this monstrosity on my board. This is great. This is really cool. So there's that. White Russian Roundels, Imperial Russian Roundels, these are the ones that match the board. I also got the more detailed Roundel as well. Kind of felt like a player's choice thing, but just to blend in with everything, I would probably just use these out-of-box Roundels. Russia also needs rails. They need 7 of these rail markers. And that's it. And you gotta get, buy 10 from historical board gaming, but they just need 7 because they sell them in 5s. This is a capital marker from Risk. This is from the version with the arrows for pieces, and using the red one or any color of the colors, but just because Russia has a special move. Let me get this out of the way. Russia has a special move where they can move their capital for $12, but the capital starts off in Petrograd. And if a civil war happens, it gets moved automatically, pretty much. But this is just because we have the capitals designated with physical cities, and everybody is so used to Moscow being the capital. This is just a really nice reminder that of what is the current capital for Russia, because the current capital is where you can mobilize unlimited units as the power, can do that. So that is what this marker is for, and I highly recommend having some visual marker for that. And that is the only one you will need like that. And then here are, of course, our different task force markers that I like to use. Moving on, we got Germany, and this is probably the beast of it. Germany, like I said, is going to need a lot of infantry, but the nice thing is that if you have a game of Axis and Allies Classic, that's 2 of them. Here, see. So on the left is a out-of-box 1914 infantry. Ooh, fellas, he really wants to rejoin his friends. Okay, so out-of-box 1914. This is Axis and Allies Classic. It's a little bit lighter, but it is quite honestly spot on and very similar. And so I just grabbed all of my, to give even more infantry to Germany to use. You know, if you're not wanting to paint, I would highly recommend just poaching your infantry from your game of Classic that, let's face it, it's probably sitting on your shelf and it's been like that for some time. So I like to make use of pieces I've already had, you know. So that is my infantry solution to Germany. Artillery, out of box, trucks, once again. I have the Shapeways ones. Cavalry, historical board gaming. Just the German gray cavalry. Or actually, I think it's actually not German gray. This is actually Anzac cavalry. And again, it's a little lighter, but I mean, gray is gray. It's close enough. Transports, submarines, cruisers, dreadnoughts. I will say it is annoying. Out of box 1914 only comes with 4 subs per nation, so give you that as a heads up. You could get more subs in gray from historical board gaming, or you could do it from poach your gray subs from Classic to give you some more subs. But just as a heads up, because our setup currently requires all 8 subs, I think, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or actually, I think it's 6. Sorry, we have 6 subs. Yeah, we have 6 subs, I think, in the original starting set. In our starting setup, the original game only has 4, but I think we have 6 in our starting setup. So if you go hog wild with subs, that can be an issue. But you can also just get gray subs and just different kinds of gray subs. Anyway, so here are the out-of-box fighters, and if you want more fighters, historical board gaming does have this kind of biplane for, well, that one's glued a little off center, but it's still fine. But they have this kind of biplane as a standard piece of theirs, and so you can just buy this. I would just buy this, and if you wanted more fighters, you can buy these and just kind of beef up your German Air Force a little bit if you wanted to. And if you feel so inclined to include hero units into your game, I highly recommend it. Here is the classic Red Baron. Now here is one from historical board gaming that I painted, and this is a Red Baron marker, a flight stand marker. So that's pretty cool. And then just by comparison, if you got one from their Shapeways store, it looks like that. So this is the earlier one I got before they made this available, and I painted it. As you can see, the Shapeways one is a little softer red, doesn't have as good of detail. Let's see if it focuses. Come on, focus. Yeah, more or less. This one looks a lot better. This one is like 3D printed this way. So anyway, moving on from there. We of course have the A7Vs. You can't have, that was one of the biggest things. I just wanted to have A7Vs in my game. Madman also made some really good A7V molds, but these are the German tanks. They only made 20 in the war. I painted a bunch, but there you go. A7Vs. Now moving on to Zeppelins, the weird, wonderful world of Zeppelins. And you can use them to bomb, or you can use them as air transports. This is a large one. HBG has 2 different sizes. I only have 1 large, but they have, as a kind of a comparison, here is a small, here is their large. I kind of prefer the small, personally. Let's see, right? Yeah. See, it's a little bit bigger, a little longer, a little beefier, but overall, I like that one more. And if you have the flight stands, it's good to have. You need some bomb markers to keep track of how many bombs each Zeppelin has. They can hold up to 2. At the same time, you can also use Zeppelins as air transports, and so you need air transport markers, and those are from combat miniatures. There's no paratrooping, but this is the only one that's just, I like this one because it just says transport. You can't air transport into combat, only into friendly territories. Side note. And let's see, moving on from there, If you want to play it with rail guns, another expanded piece. Let's see if I can get them out of here first. Only France and Germany can build them. And there's 2 different molds. This is the Paris gun mold. And I have 4 of them painted. I feel like that is realistically enough, given the amount of time we got to play this game pretty much. I would recommend at least 30 of these Roundels, just because Germany really can go crazy, and I have gone crazy as Germany in some of these games and stuff. But they really can go nuts, so I would recommend 30 of these HBG Roundels. And then you'll also need, to work with the Zeppelins, if you play with the Zeppelins, you'll need airship bases. And a set of 5 is more than enough. You'll probably only need maybe 2 or 3. You start off with 1, and then you just have... you start off with 1, you can build more, but realistically, you're probably going to maybe build 1, but you can build. There's no limit, but you can only build them on German territories, German original territories, so realistically, you're not going to have a ton of them. Anyway, so that is Germany. And then move on to France real quick, and then I think I'll split this and do another video. So we got France. France. Basically, again, everything is the same. Again, 2 sets of out-of-box pieces: infantry, artillery, transports, submarines, cruisers, dreadnoughts, all out-of-box pieces. We have the HBG Roundels. The only task force I have for France is this one, which most of you are probably very familiar with, and that's really the only good one I found for France. Trucks. This is an HBG truck, Liberty truck. This is another Shapeways one, so I did some of each for France. I will say, so this is a Liberty truck mold, and I will say when I was painting these, I accidentally dropped one, and you'll see, one second. I accidentally dropped one when I was painting it, and let's see, it wasn't this one, but if you see, this is very, very thin right here. So if you drop this, like I dropped it outside accidentally when I was moving from my laundry room back to my room after painting. This one one of these fell off, and it cracked right there and just broke. And I had to find the other piece and glue it back together, and it still works, but it's just that is a weak point there. And I just want people to be aware of it with this mold from HBG, if this is what you go with for trucks. Okay. What else? Fighters are out of box. Bombers, once again, HBG. I went with everybody's specific mold, more or less, for them. And then we have railway guns. I can't remember the exact name of this railway gun, but it is the one that France, the only other one that can come into play. And I have about 8 of these. I originally meant to buy 4, but I accidentally doubled my order and got 8. So that's why I have 8. But again, shouldn't have too many of these on the board in play if you do use them. They are expensive, but they can do some damage and stuff. But yeah, so yeah, railway guns. Pretty cool, huh? I did paint these, and you can probably also get these from Shapeways as well, from their page if you don't want to paint them. Here are tanks. So I did paint tanks. What else? I painted some tanks. So this is a Schneider tank, I think is what it's called, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's kind of weird looking. It's like a box with a bunch of different guns around it, right? Okay, so this one's painted. This one I actually got, oops, sorry. I'll get 2 others. So by comparison, this one I painted. These 2 I bought, or these 2 styles, HBG must have dug these out of their closet, and I think they're from Shapeways, right? So these aren't painted. They're the same material as that Red Baron I showed you. They're not painted. They look a little different. They look a little off kind of by comparison. But I believe if you bought this from Shapeways and colored in blue, it would come like this. And just kind of compare it to, you know. So like the infantry is kind of like in the middle of these 2. So again, this is what I painted. These are not painted. Okay. Anyway, moving on from there, that concludes France. Okay. So next up on the chopping block is, what is it? Oh, this is out of order actually. The British Empire. But I'm at the 25-minute marker, so I'm going to cut and pick up from here. So stay tuned.